6 years experience in renewable energy, leading from inception to financial closure, right through to construction. I have been leading the group's projects from I have about 4 projects, one in the DRC, which is a hydro plant, and one in Zimbabwe, Africa, which is a solar plant, one in Kenya, which is a hydro and solar, and one in South Africa, which is a hybrid, which is battery storage and solar. So I've quite a lot of experience in renewable energy. And today I'll be your moderator for this session. Well, this webinar is organized by the Islamic Chamber Training Academy, which is a specialized institution that offers training courses in business management. And its aim is developing human capabilities and advancing the private sector across the Islamic world. The webinar today aims to explore the critical role of renewable energy in mitigating climate change, combating environmental degradation, and enhancing energy security. It also seeks to highlight strategies for leveraging renewable energy to promote sustainable economic growth and resilience. And today our speaker for this webinar will be Mr. Tony Tu, the founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief in Renewable in Africa. He's going to share his expertise on renewable energy innovations. Now we'll welcome you, Mr. Tony. So it's now your turn to give us your knowledge on this topic.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rutendo. So, and it was good to hear what your company is doing. I must admit, it's very interesting. I definitely believe that we need to talk afterwards.
Yeah.
So I think thank you very much to everyone else joining and everybody else watching as well, whether live or later. So it's always a pleasure to discuss that. So like Rutendo said, so my name is Tony Tu. So founder and CEO of this company called Renewables in Africa. And what I wanted to do for this session, we're gonna have a conversation with Rutendo for sure. I think she's prepared some very interesting questions that I can't wait to discuss. But I wanted just to kickstart with a very short presentation, which is sort of setting the scene a little bit without saying too much. And what we would like to do is obviously to welcome questions from people if there's any. So if that's fine with you, I will share my screen. Am I okay to do that now, Rutendo?
Yes, please do share your screen.
Okay, excellent. So let me know if you could see the screen right now.
Yes, okay. I can.
Good. Okay. So as I say, I'm just going to go and share that this presentation. And as I say, so I think I always like to kickstart and sort of share some ideas to what really got me into this world, right? So, in fact, I attended a conference in 2018. No, sorry, in 2008, 2009, and that conference was talking about the electrification of Africa, right? And this image that you see on the picture right now, this is actually what changed my whole career, because I actually started as an automotive engineer, so that was my job up until then. And when I saw that image 2009, it really shocked me a little bit, right? And so for obvious reason, right? You can see that a better part of the rest of the world seems to be quite well lit. And there is that big hole in the middle, right? Africa was quite dark. And I looked at that. I was that time, obviously now I'm getting used to this image, just like when we're getting used to any sort of a big issue in the world. So we adjust to it, and it doesn't look as bad as it looks anymore, although it's still the case. So that image, like I say, so the first time I saw that really disturbed me. Now, obviously, slightly less so because I'm used to it. But I thought, okay, why that? Why do we have that? Yeah. And it was quite interesting because I actually grew up in Africa, more specifically in Cameroon. And yes, I knew that we have some light issues, but I never really realized, how concerning it was up until the time I saw that image. I could see the contrast. And clearly for me, I knew that there was something wrong there. And I decided, hey, as opposed to just staying here, be angry, why not doing something about that? So how can we actually contribute to change this picture? That's really what set me into motion. So from there, I left what I was doing. Okay, progressive, right? It's not like the next day. So I moved on from automotive engineering into energy. I know nothing about energy. I had to sort of train myself, and I figured out that we needed more energy now. I'm going to talk about more energy. So which way you're going to go? You're going to go dirty one or you're going to go clean one? As simple as that, right? So I know it's not always that simple, but I'm just very going quickly so that we don't spend unnecessary time on things that we shouldn't, because later on we have some great questions. So, and looking at where I am, the company that I'm leading, you understand that, okay, I decided to go renewable way, right? So that's really that image that set me into motion. I just wanted to say that. So, and it's also good to set some certain things in context. I just wanted to give you some few stats here that also can help the discussions. When we're looking at the global youth populations, so we could see that, as we're projecting ourselves up until 2060, we could see that the for most of the rest of the world, so it's actually either declining, like we see in Asia, or actually stabilizing, or yeah, it's stabilizing. There's only one place where it's really skyrocketing. Yeah, so that's the one in red here, right? It's really, really impressive to see, and that is the continent of Africa. Apologies from talking a lot about Africa here. Obviously, we definitely making sure that we having global conversation here. But it's far to say that but it's also good to say that that's obviously the industry or the sector I know the most. Although I have a good knowledge about the global industry, that's a sector I know the most, and it's good to maybe showcase some of the facts or that we want to discuss, right? So the global population from Africa, the youth population is skyrocketing. More specifically, if you look at the growth of Africa, the very interesting thing is recently I've seen some stats which actually confirm also that. So essentially in 2024, we go in 2025. In 2024, I don't know if you know, but we're already 1.4 billion people. That's in the continent of Africa, right? This graph is saying 1.5. You could see we're not that far, right? So we're definitely growing at a very, very, very fast pace. And you could see, so if we following that trend, by 2050, which is about what, something like 25 years, two decades, we're going to be the 2.5 billion. So that is a lot of people. And with a lot of people come a lot of obviously requirements, that needs to be met. And we look at also the global workforce, right? And the global workforce, we kind of have the same kind of trend that we saw with the populations. That means the rest of the world either declining or maintaining themselves, but there's obviously one that is really still skyrocketing. You could see that same thing here. Yeah. So that means that, in the next 25 years, Africa is going to add about 8 million people in the workforce. So that's huge. Yeah. Imagine what it represents as a market. And if you look in comparison with all the other, all the other places that are listed there, it's no comparison whatsoever, right? The closest it comes is actually India. And even then, Africa is going to add 4 times more than that. Yeah. So that's for you to really set the context here and to understand why it's good to have the conversation we're having today. Because as we're talking about that, there's also an issue regarding global warming. And I want to discuss about that because sometimes when we talk about that, yes, it's fair to say and to repeat that the continent of Africa has not or is not responsible for global warming. That's fine. Yeah, that's historically that's absolutely correct. But when we're looking at obviously the consequences that we're seeing, so if you look at the average temperature, it's been significantly rising. So yeah, so in the continent, and if you've been traveling in various cities, I'm sure you've noticed that. Personally, I've noticed it. So I grew up in Douala, which was in Cameroon. From time to time, I don't live in Douala anymore, but whenever I go there, I can see and feel that it's definitely getting hotter. That's for sure. Yeah, and even my parents who still live there will say will say the same. So clearly, the global warming phenomenon is real, right? You could feel it. Yeah. You could sometimes say, hey, I want to ignore it. That's just propaganda. That's fine. But at the end of the day, you could feel it, right? And some measurement also back it up. So I'm just going to say that, but this phenomenon, like I said, you could see it's not a new thing. It started, about 1980s with the year I was born, right? and obviously I'll present you the hottest family in the world. So obviously that's me, my sister, and my mom. Back in these days, I didn't know anything about it, right? So I was just living a very comfortable life. I didn't pay attention to this problem, right? But like I say, so when you come and grow, you're looking at some of those stuff, you realize like, hey, those things are real. And now you start asking the question, so what can I do to make sure that, I can help things get better. For me, not only for me, but more importantly, for my children, who's going to be part of the 800 million people that are going to be added as part of the workforce. Yeah. And also for older people. And like I say, the global warming situation in the continent, the reason we want to be talking about that and the way we want to be acting is because the consequences are quite drastic. Yeah. So if you're looking at comparison to 1970s, the frequency of drought is 3 times as much, the storm was 4 times as much, and you have a lot more floods. I'm sure if you're one of those countries, you see it on a regular basis. Again, like I say, it doesn't always make the news, the headlines, but it's a real problem that we want to be talking about. Yeah. So, and like I say, 20% of the floods, 1/3 of the drought recorded globally nowadays seem to be in the continent. So we are very much affected. And what we see in the continent of Africa is the same as well in the emerging world. Yeah. So that's why I'll say, hey, we could pretend that we're not affected by that, but yet, yes. And that's why you will see discussion at places like COP29 was getting very much heated because people know that, hey, okay, the people that really struggle the most, right? So I think, they don't have that much to say, and probably also because they don't have the money and they get ignored. But it's a problem that we really need to be talking about. And as we're talking about the African landscape, I'm just going to wrap it up there. A couple of slides to focus on the conversation. We now understand that yes, we need more light. Yeah, we need more light. We need more power, right, in order to grow, to provide all the resources and that new population would need 800 million, like I say, by 2060. So how can we now shift the the energy mix that we have right now? From we can see 2020, 2030, you can see a lot of it is still heavily dominated by fossil fuel. And fossil fuel is still going to be there for foreseeable future, that I know. But we need to have a better mix, a better energy mix, just to make sure that we don't aggravate that issue of global warming, and obviously sort of make worse the situation that we see right now. That's why we're talking about that. That's why we know that we understand that we need a lot more, let's say, cleaner a cleaner energy to move forward. And I just wanted to show you this graph so that you could see where we need to go from 2020 to 2030, and obviously have a better representation. So I just give you again here the capacity that we have for Africa at the moment, 260 gigawatts, which may sound a lot when you look at that in isolation, but if you compare to other places in the world, it's ridiculous, right? So that's not even what a country like Spain will have for the whole of the country. So basically we need a lot more power, but we need to be careful about which power we actually bringing in because we still have to deal with a certain situation. Yeah. So and here just very quick snapshots as well where we are right now, globally speaking. So you can see that compared to 2012, 10 years later, 15 years later. So the energy mix has not changed that much. Yes, we're getting more renewables. This is added to the additional global consumption that we have, but still represent barely 13%, of the whole mix. So how can we considerably decrease what we have right here? Like I said, we're still gonna have 40 for foreseeable future, right? But how can we obviously get up to 50% renewable? That's one of the key questions we want to be discussing here. So yeah, and the sources that we're looking at to make it happen. There's 5 I could list here, but there are more that have been developed. You have solar, you have hydro, you have wind, you have geothermal, you have biomass, and nowadays there are new technologies like green hydrogen, which is the technology is not new per se, but the way to produce it is what makes it new. And yeah, so on and so forth. I think I just want to stop at this stage. I'm just gonna say, if we act the way we act, we can provide, yes, more power to the continents for sure, but making sure that it's actually responsible power, cleaner and greener power. So I'll leave it at that for now. So my details are there. You can get in touch with me. But I just want to get a chance to jump into the Q&A that Rutendo has prepared, and I could see that we have more people, obviously in the in the audience, probably looking forward to questions as well. So yeah, Rutendo. So hopefully I've not taken too much time here. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Tony, for sharing your valuable insights. Well, since with my experience in the renewable energies, the governments and the private sector, the businessmen, have not been in sync when it comes to renewables. It is very difficult for, I don't know for whatever reason, that the government and the businesses they can't work together. What strategies and how can the government and the businesses work together to accelerate the adoption of renewable energy?
Yeah. So thanks for the question. So I wouldn't say that they have not been working together at the moment. I would say it depends what countries, because obviously we're going to be probably specific. So if you're talking about in Europe, we were talking about in Africa, talking North America, it depends, right? So, but I could see certain, globally speaking, I could say there's definitely a willingness to engage. Now, because they sometimes have conflicting, let's say, agendas or interests, that's where you see some clashes. But overall, what I could say is government, what I'm expecting from government, okay, I'm speaking from private sector, and it's probably easy to say, it's to create, an environment that is conducive for better investment, for renewables, and also help us with that environment probably by setting clear target at the beginning, because it's still a relatively new sector, right? And at times you want to force things a little bit before you can get things to run on their own way. So the government can help by setting up clear targets that some countries are doing. I know countries like Denmark have done it, South Africa uh, have done it recently. The UK, the Prime Minister announced that he wanted to provide to decarbonize, I think 95% clean energy by 2030 or something like that. So they are some target that the government can take and policies that they can put in place to develop a conducive environment for investment. The US has done it with the Inflation Reduction Act, so which is President Biden. So is it going to survive President Trump? No idea. We'll see. And business on their side, they can keep on innovating and scaling technologies, right? And when you get those two guys working together, what they can do is to foster, public-private partnership that will offer, incentive and streamline permitting processes to accelerate the renewable energy adoption. So I may leave it at that for now.
Okay, no, that's fine. My second question is, I'm speaking on most parts of the world who
Yep.
are not so privileged, who are more on the poor end, those people are the ones that suffer the most when it comes to lighting and power.
Correct.
Which is mostly the rural areas and the underdeveloped places in the world.
Mm-hmm.
How can renewable energy help address the energy poverty in those communities? I understand from my perspective and from other people's perspectives that renewable energy is a very expensive project to start with. You will need a lot of income and a lot of capital to build a plant. And then here we're talking about the underprivileged, the vulnerables, and we're saying let's go green as the world. How can we balance, the underprivileged or the vulnerable people and getting renewable energy, because green energy means less money that you need in the long run. But at first, it's a big capital injection that is needed for it.
Yeah. So to respond to that, I'm going to say yes. I think I like that we're always talking about the fact that renewable requires a lot of money upfront. That's absolutely true. But the reality is, so do the other powers. Right? Because
Okay.
the reason, by the way, we actually talked about energy poverty, so that means from a legacy, so the existing power has not been able to provide, right? And why has it not been able to provide? One of the reasons, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons is also the fact that, for you to expand the grid to those places, rural areas, because when you talk about rural areas, it means as well that the population density is probably not the same as urban agglomerations, right? So that means to expand the grid there. So there's usually you probably will know there's a cost, for every connection, for every new connection that you have into the grid. I don't know if you know. So and that cost is about $400. It depends on the places, but it can go up to $400, per new person. And the reason that grid expansion, one of the reasons that grid expansion has not happened is because it's expensive to 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 do it in places where you know that many people. So that means the new power that needs to be added, let's be honest, is already inexpensive, whichever way you're going. That's the thing. So to pretend that it's only going to be expensive for renewable, no, that's not true. It's always going to be it's always going to be expensive, right? It may be slightly more expensive for renewable, like you say, but that's at first. But when you consider power or power installation, you always need to look at that on the lifetime, because there's no such a thing that I'm just going to install something and that's it. No, right? You still need to provide fuel on a regular basis. You need to maintain it and so on and so forth. So it's important to look at that from a lifetime cost. And when you look at that from a lifetime cost perspective, there's no comparison. So it's much more better to go to go green. So personally, I think renewables energy, especially solar and wind, they can be deployed. This is also the thing, because they are. It's easier to decentralize them compared to obviously other power that is much more centralized. So you can deploy them easily, quickly, in rural and remote area where the grid connectivity is limited. In fact, I believe that I'm not one of those guys who said that we don't need grid. We need grid. I think we need both solutions. So no, but there are places, for example, rural areas where the grid can't usually go to because financially it's not viable. We can have solar and wind there. And just with decentralized power distributions, it will provide affordable, reliable energy that will support the local development and reduce energy poverty. I know one of the issues regarding that is how do you make it affordable? So how do you have a business plan that makes sense? So that's not a question that we can debate. But ultimately, that's what I see. So using the fact that it's easily deployable, renewables, it's very quick to build compared to the others. Just to reach out to those people and provide the energy that they deserve.
Okay, thank you. Before I proceed to my next questions, if the attendees have any questions, please drop them down in the chat box, and then I will ask the questions. And then now moving on to my next question. With the growth of AI, artificial intelligence, and data analytics, how does AI and data analytics enhance the efficiency of renewable energy systems?
Well, so the addition of AI and data analytics, I think, is definitely will enhance any sector, isn't it? Right? In terms of the rapidity of process, you're processing information much more quickly, and then you have as well a lot of new intelligence that you can add into the mix. This is true for every sector, but it's also true definitely as well for renewables, because it's all about getting the information that you have and seeing how you can actually process them to understand how you can much more efficiently deploy solar, wind, and any other technologies, and how can you use that to develop system that's much more clever and intelligent, to reach out to certain people. And also, one of the challenges that we have as well in Africa and some emerging world is the fact that we don't have access to a lot of data. And because we don't have access to a lot of data, it's sometimes difficult to make, uh, let's say, the right decisions, right conclusions. So this is where I can say we can then use some simulation model that are AI powered to maybe plug some of these gaps and come up with something that is still closer to the reality. So that's how I can do that. And a lot of it, a lot of the solution as well should take into account energy efficiency and energy management, right? So have the right monitoring system in place. And in that, I see something like AI providing a lot of support to, yeah, to better manage even the little energy that we have already. So yeah, and to make it more efficient. So I see AI for me as having a big role to play, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much for the information. Um, well, I'm going back to the financial aspect of renewable energy.
Yep.
In Spain, in Europe, let's say Europe, America, I don't think, my perspective is, I don't think they a lot of financial barriers when it comes to the renewable energy than those that we have here in Africa.
Yep.
And other parts of the world. And I look at it when we are bidding for a project here, and when we are looking for financing to finance our project, it all boils down to the financial modeling of the project. And now my question is, what is the key barrier to for renewable energy projects, and how can our financial modeling be used to address those key barriers, and how can we best do the financial modeling?
Wow, that's a great question. But that's a great question. I believe that I think some of our clients we're working with, so hopefully you won't mind me plugging them here. They call numerous. I think
That's fine.
they would have loved to respond to this question. So I'm not a financial modeler, but let me nevertheless still address the questions. So I guess the question is, how can we enable more renewable energy in Africa? And you were taking a comparison here with Europe, which seems to have, let's say, a better route to attract investment.
Yes.
For example, the African project, and how can you reflect that in the financial modeling? I think usually it comes down to for those renewables energy, it comes down to how do you. There's many other aspects, right? But which capacity building is part of it. The regulatory framework is part of it. But usually from finance perspective, what I know also it comes down to the risk. So how do you de-risk the project? Yeah, and unfortunately, as you talked about the risk, so you also should basically to attach that the perception of risk, because it all depends on obviously who is actually assessing the project. So the way an African investor who is very comfortable with Africa as a continent and know well the place will assess a project will never be the same than a European investor, an American investor assessing the same thing, because they don't have they don't understand the ground properly. And as such, the risk profile of the same project could be different, from whether you're an African investor, then a European investor, then American investor, Asian investor. The challenge is most of the investors that tend to plug into at least the big project, the utility scale project in the continent, will tend to come from outside of the continent. You already see now where the problem is. Like basically, most of these guys, their perception of Africa come within a certain lens, with certain lenses, right? They look at the political stability, they look at the economic stability. Do we have the right capacity building? And the way they will mark or assess all those elements will always be different than you on the ground who understand the place very well. And unfortunately, most of the time they end up obviously and they end up obviously evaluating uh, African project to the higher end of the spectrum in terms of the risk compared to the others. And as soon as you're talking about that, Now, obviously, that means investors become a little bit scared, right? And obviously, and people that will come, they will come and they ask for a very high premium. And those very high premium could make the project, the whole project, let's say, not worthy
Yes.
for the developers. So that's the imbalances. So obviously, I don't have the silver bullet solution to fix that, but it definitely comes down to obviously how do you properly assess as well those risks. Because it's also fair to say, unfortunately, the continent is sometimes judged, I say, too harshly. Because most of the time, infrastructure projects that happen in Africa, they I'm not a financier, but the few uh, stats that I've seen, first of all, the level of default is very, very low because there's so much work that's put into it, and sometimes it's some of the most profitable, right, at times. But it's not always well appreciated. So we probably need to have investors that know a little bit better the continent. We also need to have homegrown investors. That's what we definitely need to develop personally. I believe I like to see a lot more pension funds from Africa getting involved into the sectors. So that'd be very useful. And how do you better reflect that in the financial modeling? That's why guys and Numeric, sorry to plug them again. They're not the only one. There are many others, right? Numeric that properly know the ground will be better placed to do that than maybe some firm sitting in Europe or sitting in America doing it, having not, because the way they would model and they would assess it would clearly greatly influence the investor who actually rely on those guys to do it. Yeah, so that's what I say is good to be working with the right person and reflect that and come up with let's say a much better sensitivity analysis. That will look at different scenarios that will help those guys to make the right kind of decision. But for me, part of the solution start by us, as Africans. We need to develop better source of investment investment market, capital markets, and also develop as well our own consultancies who would know how to properly evaluate those projects. Like I say, there's no silver bullet, but that's for me at least a contribution that I can make to this question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sure amongst our attendees there are people who are really interested in the business, knowing how to go about with the renewable energy industry. And I'm sure this is an insight for them to know that they must be prepared to have these challenges when it comes to the financing of the projects. And now that we've been talking about renewable energy globally, we have not kind of included recently. Apparently now renewable energy is there, yes, but I have not really seen where it has really been included in the desert areas, the Arctic areas. Do you think, or do you see the role of how do you see the role of renewable energy evolving in those regions? Is there a way where, because I understand in the deserts, that's where it's either where there's the most sunny, and there's at night there's winds, which is a viable area to have both a solar and a wind plant. But however, there are also other aspects that affect those areas, which is usually in the desert. It's the unstable ground that is there because of too much sand and all. Do you see in the future renewable energy evolving in those areas?
Yeah, not only I see, usually the way I look at this opportunity, probably because I have the eyes of an entrepreneur, I don't usually start by the challenge to define what is possible, not possible, right? I first of all look at what is the opportunity, because that opportunity will always come with a challenge that we need to solve in order for us to properly exploit and tap into the real potentials. So the sun, as soon as we understand that the sun per se, it's an amazing source of power, we gotta find a way to harness this a little bit better. Yeah. And the first thing is to do is to first of all take a decision that we gotta do it. And the second thing, I figure out, okay, how do we make it happen? So what could help? Yeah, that that that's what I want to say. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to say as well is I don't need to go very far because there's already project that are actually looking at exploiting that. There's one called Desert to Power,
Oh,
which
okay.
is looking at the countries from the Sahel regions. In fact, what has slowed down a little bit this project, it's you see obviously the political situation in some of those Sahel countries like Niger or like Burkina Faso and so on and so forth. But I'm sure they're going to be revived at some point in time. But there's already a project at Desert Power that's obviously developing a corridor of solar to all those countries, in all those countries to really tap into the technology. So clearly there's a look. It's not just the desert to power one. You also have to do southern, Namibia and Botswana. They also have projects that they're looking at deploying, where they're going to be deploying a lot of solar sort of program that they want to establish there. So clearly, those examples are there. They may be a little bit dominant at the moment. They are there, but also because of the size of this program, so it takes certain amount of time before they can come to fruition. But it's not because the general public won't hear about them that they don't exist. When you obviously guy like me in the sector, we definitely know that on institution like the African Development Bank, the many other institutions, they're working on mega projects like that, but it takes some time to get them to fruition. Part of the reason is also looking at the proper financial modeling, the risk profile. How do we take it to the point whereby investors feel confident to take it forward, and which investor do we get involved? How do we bring them in? Having said that, one of the challenges that those projects needs to solve to become viable, like you said, is to look at the fact, recognizing the fact that we're also evolving in extreme climate conditions, right? That's fine. So that means the technology that will be deployed there, so we probably need some sort of adaptation, right? Like, for example, we want to have coated solar panels for desert use. We also want to have, for example, the ice resistant coating, for wind turbines. So if we're in Arctic condition, that's obviously not in Africa, but in other places. But I just want to say that when you're also in this kind of environment, you want to develop the right equipment, to ensure that you will still have the efficiency and the durability that is required for those extreme climate. But I just want to reassure people that those things are happening. So it's just like I say, it takes a long time to come to fruition.
Okay, thank you. At least now, we know if there are any entrepreneurs and any business-minded people, they start looking there because no one is really doing anything there. And as much there are projects that are in the pipeline, we need more of projects in those areas. So my next question is, what lessons can countries with high renewable energy integration offer to nations just beginning their energy transition?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I've always said it's not wise to always think that you're going to reinvent the wheel, right? So one of the best, especially like I said, for people that are new into the sector, I think if you have really no idea whatsoever, look for in the direction of country have done something, are doing something, see what you can learn from them, and just pick up from there. And when we're talking about countries with high renewable energy integration, so I can think of a couple of countries that I can mention, but there are others, right? So I can think of Denmark, think of Germany. But what they have put in place to enable this energy transition, at least this high integration as we're talking about, it's strong policy framework, because power in general, uh, renewable in particular, require a certain environment that needs stability. And very simple, infrastructure project in general, those are millions, $100 million project, sometimes billions. And usually it takes a long time to recoup it. We're talking about here something like 15, 20, 30 years. So I mean, if I'm an investor putting my money there, I want to have a visibility on the horizon that, hey, I'm going to be able to make my return in, year 10, year 12, so on and so forth. So the regulation in place should give me confidence. Yeah, and the people who actually develop that regulation, that policy framework, is government. Yeah, our country. So countries like Denmark, Germany, what they've done well. So they put a strong policy framework in Germany. For example, you may have heard about policy usually referred to energy Wende. I don't know how to properly pronounce it, but it's a simple word to say energy transition. Their word, right? So that means no matter the color of the government that comes into play, that ruled the country at the time, there's a sort of continuity from that standpoint. So that means for investor, you feel comfortable. So beside that as well, you want to have a certain level of community engagement. That's absolutely important because community is actually part of it. So the key stakeholders, you want to have an integration as well. So that's what those two countries have done with the broader European grid. So we want to have for us grid better integration in the grid. Africa, we have some power pool, but unfortunately they're not working well. Apart from the Southern Africa power pool, that we see for SADC countries, which I would say it's okay if you also have the Western African power pool. That's okay, working, let's say, okay, I would say, but Central Africa, East Africa, there's a lot to learn. But like I said, we need to strengthen more that grid. Why is it important? Because remember, electricity is one of those commodity. You can't store it. When it's produced, you need to use it. And the reason we need to have strong integrated grid is so that we can have those, energy exchanges. So that means, for example, if Zim is producing a lot more energy that they're not using, they can pass it on to Zambia or to South Africa and so on and so forth. So we need that. So Denmark, Germany, they've done it well to a better integration of the European grid, and that has enabled a successful renewables integration. So I can just leave it at that for now. So basically, I'm talking about policy, talking about community engagement, talking about having a stronger technical grid, European grid. If we can emulate that, so that could help us in deploying better renewables energy and allow energy transition.
Okay, my second from last question is now talking about community engagements. When you approach an entered area, and you've won a tender or you've won a bid to either install a solar plant, hydro, it's usually in the underdeveloped areas.
Yep.
It's usually in the rural areas where there is little to no knowledge of what renewable energy is. And we often suffer resistance from the community to say, we want to build this. This is going to help you in this way. But it's always a mission to get the community to then agree to say, okay, fine, you can go ahead. Like, I'll give you an example of when we were in the DRC with our hydro power. It was DRC as it is there's always war. Something is happening. Guns are blazing every now and then. And then right where the war is, that is where the project is supposed to be. And now we are faced with a situation where we have to convince two different people who are fighting that we need to build this hydro plant. And it took us about 3 years to have it done because there was a lot of resistance. So how can we engage communities in a way that makes it easier for the businesses to do their project well? And remember, most businesses would have signed EPC contracts by then. So the longer it takes to get the community to agree, the longer it takes for the EPC contract, and it means damages and other issues that are going to affect the business. So how can we address that, and how can we help engage the communities to support renewable energy?
Okay, so first of all, let me just say very quickly on the example that you mentioned. So I would say it's definitely a challenge that is being seen in many places in the continent, but those are on the extreme side, though. Yeah, I would like to say, because even DRC, which I know a little bit, the country. So when you moved from that area, really in northeast, where you see all that trouble, I think the rest of the country, like I say, so you may have a very different very different experience. So I'm just sorry to hear that it took you 3 years to get it done, but it's also a reality that one needs to deal with. So beside that, so what I see, for example, from the community, remember, many of these people don't have power. They're lacking many things. So
Yes.
many of the things, most of the time, in fact, they won't fight it. And the reason I can, the evidence for me is, look at even traditional power fossil fuel, all those pipelines that have been built. Many of those ones have sometimes been done with the consent from the community, because what they were told that it was going to help them to do a certain number of things, and in certain places, I think it has done it. Yeah, so we also have to give them credit for that. So I don't personally think that the community, it's a big challenge, because they really need power. They really need a development for their, because usually most of the times in rural areas, there's a lot of things that those people are missing and would like to get. So if there is an early transparent engagement with them, sharing the economic benefit like job creation or addressing environmental concern. And I think they will be supportive in building those renewable project. And if on top of that, obviously, we also making sure that they having their fair share in terms of the profit generated from those projects, and we can also help them to develop a certain know-how locally, and also create maybe a local hub for them that would increase, I would say, local acceptance. I personally don't think that the community is such a big problem, providing you set it to them the right way. Because obviously there's some other aspect that needs to be take into account, the cultural aspect that needs to be taken to take into account, the right way to approach them. Many of those places, you have a hierarchy you need to respect. You need to approach the older boys first, the chief. So
Yes,
you want
yes.
to do that properly. So, and if it's done properly, I think in many cases, I don't think they will resist it. Yeah, because you're actually helping them as opposed to the opposite. I may be biased, but that's the way I see that.
Yeah, and no, just adding a comment also, we also have the challenge of bribery in
Yeah.
most parts of Africa. It's also a challenge the to the renewable energy sector, in as much as we as business people want to have this project up and running in no time. There are these restrictions that are always there, which will then, cripple the entrepreneur in some way, so that they
Yeah.
can just get the project up and running for the benefit of the local community also. So my last question then comes to say, what measures can be taken to ensure that renewable energy projects benefit local economies and create sustainable jobs?
Yeah. Definitely understand that we haven't a lot of time left here, so I wouldn't drag too much on that. I just gonna say, so we can take policies to encourage, local manufacturing, for example, renewable energy component. So that's fine. We can have, skill training program to ensure that the renewable energy project will contribute economically to local communities, create jobs and developing skills. And then we can make sure that really there's a proper plan to benefit these people from the long term. And I think if we do that, we can ensure that, that would benefit local economies and create sustainable jobs. So I'm deliberately being a little bit fast here because I know we don't have enough time, but I believe those are elements that people could look at.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tony, for your insights on today's webinar, and thank you to all the attendees who were there, and to those that are going to watch this webinar later. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that whatever we discussed today is going to help you enhance your knowledge on renewable energy. And before we wrap up, I would just like to remind you that today's webinar was recorded, and it will be available for playback on ICTA's platforms, that is YouTube and other platforms. And we hope you found this session valuable And thank you again for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at our next event. At our next event, and have a great day. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Yeah. Thank you very much from my side as well. And then if any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, for example.
Sorry, I think I just saw a question.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's just people saying thank you very much.
Okay.
And I hope you guys enjoyed the webinar, and I hope that you're going to also increase your interest in the renewable energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.